What did we do at the end yesterday? What did we do yesterday? We did 3 awareness through movement lessons. Can you remember? Good. You can remember 1, 2, 3. Think it through for a minute. And did one have anything to do with another, or they were just 3 very different kinds of things, or how did the lessons, say, land in you? Where did they land? How did they land? And how do you feel yourself this morning? Maybe a little bit already with more available attention than when you came yesterday. That there's some attention available for finding out how you lie on the floor, how the different parts of yourself touch the floor or don't touch the floor, in your shoulders or the back of your pelvis. The different vertebrae of your spine. And you can become aware of the tempo or the rhythm of your breathing without imposing, but just observing, perceive it. And your general inner state. And then bend your right knee. And put your right hand in a bridge. So put your right palm on the floor with the fingers pointing. The fingers, if you can, are pointing diagonally downward. So a little bit outward. Moshe defines it as a 45-degree angle, but a little bit outward, a little bit downward. And then put your, well, maybe first do a few times the movement from yesterday. So press the right foot into the floor, lift the right hip, press the right hand into the floor, and don't make a special movement of taking your head through the gap, but only feel the transmission of force from the foot upward and from the hand downward, and the shifting of your weight, and general feeling of how you begin this movement and how the movement, how much you're able to lift your hip joint away from the floor, where the movement passes easily through your spine or not so easily. And if there's any relationship between this movement and the back of the head becoming lighter or being affected, in other words, looking around at everyone, I can see that for some people there's a break in the transmission of the movement that's such that it doesn't actually make it up through the upper part of you. So everything below is fine, but the head and the neck aren't being reached. And for other people, it's more clear. And if it's not clear right now, just observe it. There's nothing you can do unless you have more help somewhere, which is the whole point of the lesson. So, but just see how it is now. And then take your left hand and put it on your right elbow And make a little movement there of taking little self-FI in a way. You take your left hand and you move your right elbow a little bit more headward and a little bit more footward. And feel as you do that, keep your breathing easy, just feel as you do that that you're actually moving. Maybe this is good preparation for the elbow people this week, but you're have your hand on the elbow, but with this movement of the elbow upward and downward, you're moving your upper arm in the shoulder joint. So you can feel the pressure of your shoulder blade, your right shoulder blade, changing on the floor. And you're changing a little bit the habit of where your arm likes to sit in the joint by going a little bit, got a kind of neutral, and then you go a little bit above it, a little bit below it. And then do another movement of the elbow. And let me just repeat from yesterday, anytime you need to rest, you rest. You don't wait for me to give you a rest. If the wrist isn't ready for this prolonged weight bearing, you just come in and out of it as you need to. But if you can have your fingers 45 degrees downward, not upward, can you turn them or no? Yeah, okay, well, not yet. Not yet, but we'll get there, maybe, or not. Okay, we just put the arm down, rest a minute, put everything down for a minute. Maybe even just from those few little movements, the right shoulder blade feels a little different. Or something along your right side. And put your arm in the bridge position again. Bend your right knee. Right arm. The right arm, yeah. And this time, make a little movement where you take your right elbow a little bit inward and a little bit outward. And feel again, it's almost as like there's a place where a kind of neutral, where your upper arm feels quite comfortable, the way it's resting in the joint. And then maybe inward isn't as comfortable, or outward, but little by little, it starts to kind of reset. The musculature starts to change, the bias starts to change. You can make it smaller and smaller and kind of moving just a little bit right and left around that comfortable point. Feel how the pressure of your right shoulder blade on the floor is being influenced by the movement of your upper arm. What you feel in the front of your chest. And then combine those 4 points so that you make, I think you'd be better off with a pad under. So you combine those 4 points so that you make a little circle of the elbow with the help of your hand. Upward, outward, downward, inward. And feeling the movement of the upper arm relative to the shoulder blade. Shoulder blade moves a little bit, but it's more the movement of the arm. I'm looking for the, where are the headboards? Sorry. Give one to the woman in black. Yeah. They're coming. You have 5 people waiting on your needs now. That's quite a good ratio. All right. Good. Just put the arm down and rest a minute. Just rest a minute. Anybody else raise your hand if you want a headboard for under your wrist? Or you need two? Do you need one or two? She might need two. All right, feel how the right shoulder lies. Bend your right knee, put your right hand in a bridge again. Come again to the whole movement of pushing the right foot into the floor, lifting your right hip. And this time, have the idea that it's almost as if you come up through your spine, vertebra by vertebra, which isn't ideal. It's a kind of orientation of what we could pay attention to, and few people will have that available right from the beginning, that they could sense each vertebra, but one relative to the other. But you start from where you start. What is available? Where do you feel the movement passing through the different parts of your spine? And where does it become difficult to sense? More difficult to sense. And coming back home the same way, only now a chain-like movement from the top down. And your breathing is free. So that's a sequential kind of way of doing it, from the foot, through the hip joint, through the lower spine, middle spine, until it reaches your upper chest. What happens in your upper chest? Are those parts clear or not so clear? There's a movement of the shoulder blade away from the floor in order for the elbow to go upward. Think that the shoulder blade actually goes a little bit downward, and see if that changes the way the hand is able to push. Instead of thinking of the shoulder blade going headward, think that the shoulder blade goes down a little bit in the direction, and a little bit in the direction of your spine. See what that does to the upper part of the movement, which for most of you, the lower part of the movement is much more available than the differentiation of all the different parts of your chest. But that's usual, because people use their lower back and their neck for too many things that wasn't built to be used for. Rest a little bit. Put the arm down. And again, listen to your breathing. And not only listen to the breathing, but sense the breathing. So, and particularly when the air comes out, where do you feel some softening in your chest becomes possible? The air comes in by itself. We're born with that ability. The air goes out by itself. But it's interesting, when we begin to dissolve some of the little fixations of the muscles in between the ribs, how it influences the out-breath. Maybe you can discern, maybe you can sense that there's something now on the right side of the chest that's a little softer as the air comes out, like a melting in a way. And then bend your left knee. Put your left hand in a bridge. One or two times, a few times, the movement of pushing the left foot into the floor, lifting the left hip, just to feel. For many people, the movement is more clear on the side of the dominant hand. Means if you're right-handed, maybe it was clearer on the right than the left. But just feel, how is it on this side? Does it feel less differentiated or more differentiated in the way the movement passes from your foot through your hip joint, through your lower spine, middle, upward? And where are you the clearest in yourself, and where are you less clear? Where do you want the help? Where do you feel you would like to have help? Now, come back home and take your right hand on your left elbow and go through a little bit the movement of taking your elbow upward, downward, a few times. And feeling the pressure of the back of your left shoulder blade changing on the floor. And then take the inward and outward movement. You want to give yourself the feeling of a flat surface, if you can, of the hand. And then making a little circle. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you probably never did it before. That's the Feldenkrais method. Novel situations to wake up your brain. A little circle one way, the other way, feeling little by little some kind of adaptation through the musculature. And if little by little, many of you have found it, but little by little trying to coax, in a way, the elbow to a place where the lower arm can be more vertical. more at a right angle to the floor. Put the arm down and rest. Listen to how your left shoulder lies, your breathing. What you feel in your chest on the two sides. Bend your left knee and put your left foot standing. So again, I'm going to keep repeating these principles because I can see how you're doing the movement, but what I can't see is I don't necessarily see if you're in pain or not. So if you're in pain, you have to take a smaller dose of the lesson. You have to be in the bridge less. You have to self-regulate, but at the same time you participate. And that's everybody has to find that for themselves. You have to find it somehow from within. So if it's too much of a strain to be in the bridge this long with the left arm, you do less, do shorter. But you do enough that you can kind of stay in the water of the lesson, so to speak, that you can kind of follow. So now bend the left knee again, put the left arm in a bridge, and come back to the movement of pushing the left foot into the floor, lifting the hip, and coming through from the foot upward. Feel at what point. This is one way of doing it. There's many, many different ways we can initiate, places we can initiate from, and the timing of the movement. So right now we're just doing a kind of sequential movement from the foot to the hand. You'll feel at what point the elbow tends to go away from the knee tends to go away from the elbow, and which places in your spine are available to your awareness, sensory awareness, sensing, or your inner mind's eye. It means you can see it, or you can sense it, or maybe you hear it. Listen to it. Whatever it is for you, how do you follow through each part of yourself, and where do you lose the force? You're not rolling like a log over to the side, and the knee doesn't tilt inward. The knee stays vertical. That's it. Good. All right, rest a little bit. And again, you can follow how you're sensing your spine, your shoulders, back of your pelvis. Now, bend both knees. And this time, put both hands in a bridge. which is quite different than only having one in a bridge. And just a few times you push the right foot into the floor, you take the right elbow and the right knee away from each other, and then you do it on the other side. Go easy. It's more demanding in a certain part of ourselves, which we haven't learned how to use according to the full potential. So where do you feel it becomes more difficult with both hands and both knees? Or where do you feel, again, where do you feel you need help to be more comfortable? And remember what we did yesterday in the FI a little bit, this connection between the shoulder blade and the clavicle. On one end is the joint, and on the other end, the shoulder joint is actually where the clavicle connects to your sternum. So what are you doing with your sternum in this position? If you're moving one shoulder and the other, in order for those shoulders to be free, something has to happen. Keep your breathing free. What has to happen to the sternum? Well, let's start with something basic. It needs to move. First approximation. First, we'll get little by little. We'll layer more onto it. But let's start with needs to move. So how does it need to move? It's hard to say because you don't know what your options are, do you? You don't know all the possibilities. But just find out, what do you do with yourself here? And let me worry about the rest. I will worry about the options. You just worry about the awareness of what you actually do with yourself now. And then we'll come to a point where none of us will worry about anything. But keep your knees vertical. All right, rest a little bit. You see, this is the difficulty with me talking in the beginning for half an hour, because some people now feel that it's time to go to the bathroom and we're in the middle of the lesson, but you do what you need to do, okay? So we're going to keep going, and if you go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. But we're going to keep going. So lying like this, could you please press your heels into the floor and stop? And then press the back of your knees into the floor and stop. And then press the back of your hip joints into the floor, wherever you think those are, and stop. And then press the lower back, your lower back into the floor and stop. And then press the middle back, your middle back into the floor and stop. And then press your shoulder blades into the floor and stop. And then press the back of your head into the floor and stop. And then go back to the feet. And this time, when you press your feet, maybe we do it 2-3 times to give you a chance to feel it. So you press your feet into the floor and stop, and do that a few times. And feel when you press your feet into the floor like that, which other part of yourself lifts a little bit away. So if the feet go in one direction, there's like a counter response. Something else goes opposite. So when you push the feet into the floor, which part goes away from the floor? And then when you push your knees into the floor, do that a few times. Push the knees into the floor and feel, where does it get lighter? Does it get lighter in the feet? Does it get lighter in the hip joints when you push the knees back into the floor? You can feel just that little movement. You can feel a kind of ripple of that through your whole self. And then you push the back of your hip joints into the floor and stop. Do that a few times. And when you push the back of your hip joints, or we could say the back of the pelvis, your pelvis into the floor, what do you feel in the knees? What do you feel where else above it maybe gets a bit lighter? When you push the pelvis into the floor and stop, you press it backward and stop pressing. And then the middle back, press it into the floor and stop pressing a few times, the same thing. Press the middle back into the floor and stop. And as you're pressing the middle of the back into the floor like that, what other parts of yourself get light? When you press the middle of the back into the floor like that, what do you feel in your shoulders and your lower back? In your whole self? And then your shoulder blades, press them back into the floor and stop. Feel how the back of your head is influenced by the movement of pressing the back of your shoulder blades into the floor and stopping. Does the back of your head get lighter or heavier on the floor when you press your shoulder blades backward? And then press the back of your head into the floor and stop. What happens in your upper spine, in your shoulders, your upper ribs, your clavicles, when you press the back of your head into the floor and stop. And then go one at a time from the head toward the feet. It's almost the beginning of an undulatory movement. So you press the back of the head into the floor, and when you stop, you press the shoulders. And when you stop, you press the middle of the back. You pass the movement down like a ripple, like a wave, then into the lower back, pressing. And then from the lower back, you pass it into the back of your hip joints. From your hip joints to the knees, from the knees to the feet, and then back up from the feet. Now, you see, if it would be possible, it's going to be hard if your legs are so spread apart wide to have the force really pass. You'll have to play with it a little bit. So I'm only speaking to a couple of people. Most of you are fine. But so you press the knees, you press the feet into the floor, and then the knees. And then as you press the knees, the pelvis gets light. You lift the pelvis, you take a tiny little step in the direction of the back of the room. You put the pelvis down, and then you lift the middle of the back, and you take a tiny little step, and you put the middle of the back down, and then you lift the shoulders. Keep your breathing free, and you take a tiny little step, and you lift the head. In other words, you're searching for a worm, like a locomotion like a worm. Not much, just a tiny little bit through space. It's difficult if the arms are out to the side or if the legs are too much out to the side. And then, so just from the feet to the head a few times. Feel, little by little, it'll dawn on you that the lifting of one part makes another part press, and then that gets light, and then the movement is passed like kind of a ripple through you, and then the shoulders lift, and when you put them down a little bit higher on the floor than when they were where they were, and then the head becomes light as you press the shoulders backward, and you can lift the head. Take a little step. Now, could you reverse gears and go back down? How would you go down in a little bit of ways so you come back to your beginning, your starting point? Go the other way. And now, keep on doing it. Some of you are doing it, and some of you are searching for it, and some of you are efforting in a way that you won't find it. So just take away the need to do it, and go slow. Keep your breathing free, and try to study the form of what's happening here. This possibility that as one part presses, some other part becomes free to lift, and that if you take away the need to achieve it, you take away the effort, the different places in your spine and your chest will actually become lighter, and you'll be able to feel a little bit more what's possible. Everybody's kind of in the ballpark of it, but some people are just working way too hard to have nothing much happen. So you can make it the tiniest little, even if you locomote almost imperceptibly, that's good enough. But to feel how the pressing in one part allows another part to be light enough to lift off the floor, and then you simply put that part down either a little bit above or a little bit below, depending on which direction you're going. All right, rest a little bit. So what we're starting here is, as Moshe would say, we're going into deeper waters, because we're going into some kind of differentiation of the movements of your spine and of your ribs that in many areas of life have been neglected, have not been trained, have not been. And if you want to make a big, strong chest, it'll be the opposite. You'll lose a lot of that suppleness. So I say this to acknowledge that if it's not easy, it's because, yeah, it's not something you've spent a lot of time studying, perhaps. But if you just keep your attitude respectful toward your own process, little by little, I think you'll find something's going to improve. Now put both arms out to the side. You can leave the legs down long for the moment. Both arms out to the side, palms toward the ceiling. And press the back of your nails on your right hand into the floor and stop. And then press your wrist into the floor, the right wrist into the floor, and stop. Press your right elbow into the floor and stop. And then as you press the right elbow into the floor, you pass a wave-like movement to the right shoulder. Then the right shoulder presses, and that passes a movement through the clavicle to your sternum. And you pass the movement over to the left shoulder, pressing and stop. The left, I'll make it clearer as we go, then the left elbow pressing and stop. The arms are horizontally out to the side so that they're in line, and they're an extension of your clavicles. And then the left elbow, the left wrist, and the fingernails of the left hand, which many of you have very, not so easy for you to flatten your hands. So that in order to press the nails, you have to flatten the hand, don't you? You have to open it. So then you press from the left nails through your wrist, through your elbow, through your shoulder, through your sternum. You don't press the sternum, but the sternum begins to slide as you do that. And then the movement passes to the right shoulder blade, pressing the right elbow. It's like an undulation, a ripple, a wave to the wrist, to the right fingernails. Now you do that, you play with it yourself a few times back and forth, but there's certain, in the pressing, feel there's a certain kind of movement that takes place in your right clavicle and your left clavicle that actually initiates this possibility of your sternum to slide right and left. The pressing does something in the shoulder, in the clavicle, so that your sternum, when you press from the right hand through the right elbow, the right shoulder, the sternum slides to the left. And when the pressing is initiated from the left side, the sternum slides to the right. A kind of translation, a kind of differentiation, again, that is very, very rare in people. The belly dancers probably have it. The Indian dancers probably have it. But if you haven't trained it, you may not know. All right, put your arms down and rest. It's time for your break, I can see, but all right. So put both arms in a bridge, bend both knees. Come back to this. Well, first of all, how is it now to put the arms in the bridge? Have you gotten any help with that, having both arms? Where, and if you have, if it's more comfortable somewhere, where is it more comfortable? And little by little, you're going to work toward having those elbows be able to come, you know where, right? Do you know where? Okay, yes. And then push your right foot in the floor and let yourself begin. You don't have to take the head all the way back through the gap, but just that's the kind of pattern. So keep the knees vertical. If the knees don't stay vertical, you'll never find the possibility of doing the thing you don't do, doing something new. That's it. And keep your breathing free. Is there any part of yourself that feels at least a little bit lighter from the worm? We're not done. We'll have more time with that, because obviously 5 minutes isn't enough to really take a bite out of the apple, so to say, of the worm. But just feel, where do you, maybe the shoulder blades, maybe the clavicle, and what about this movement of the sternum? What's possible? It's actually a very three-dimensional movement. So just to give you a little bit more of a hint about it. So your sternum can slide, it can turn, and it can lift. In other words, technically speaking, that's three different planes of movement being combined into a very complex three-dimensional kind of movement. And everybody has a tendency to rely more on one or the other, or so some people turn but don't slide, some people slide, and many people don't lift. See, feel. And the more that moves and the clavicle moves, the more your shoulder blades are liberated. The upper ribs are liberated. All right, put everything down. Listen to how you're sensing your spine now, your breathing. How your shoulders are lying. If some part of you feels a little softer. I like the word melting. The chest, when these intercostals, muscles in between the ribs stop doing all this parasitic work that they usually do just to have us be upright. It's not the job of the intercostals to have us be upright, but people do that. They use it for that. So when that gives up some of that unnecessary work, and in all sorts of human activity, we bring in a lot of stuff in the chest that we don't need. So that starts to soften. It's a very melting feeling. That's my word. You can come up with your own word, really. Now, bend your knees and come up to sitting. And I think it's time for a break, so stand up, walk around. And feel the support of your bones, maybe a little bit more when you muscles, again, stop doing jobs that they're not really meant to do. Is it clear that you have a skeleton, the direction of having a skeleton to support you? And obviously, the deeper muscles have an anti-gravity function, but not so much the superficial ones. How does it feel? How do your shoulder blades feel? What do you feel from a lesson like this? Walk around a little bit and feel the relationship between stepping on the right foot, how it passes upward, transmission of force from the foot to where, or the left foot to where. And we'll take a 15-minute break.